everyone. Welcome to this interview with Matthew Smith. We have the pleasure to be talking and speaking and have a great and delightful conversation with Supply Frame's art director with more than 30 years of experience in the technological sector, from design user interfaces to creating compelling digital experiences. Our guest, Matt Smith, has seen all, actually, and you are really willing to share all those experiences with us and giving us tips and advices. So also we have Osman, our design leader in Fabrikod. So he's also going to ask about the design side and experience from Matt Smith. So thank you so much for coming to the video, and if you like it, please support us, and let's go for it. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you guys. Nice to see you.
What about you, Osman? Are you great?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I'm also fine. So thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the video. Okay, so one started. Okay, who is Matt? Who is Matt Smith?
Well, he is I hate to say experienced, but makes me sound old, but he is an experienced designer and manager of designers. And currently, I am an art director working for Supply Frame in Pasadena, California, USA.
Great. And what was your first job in the technological sector? Because I understand that you have been all the way back in the technological one, right? And how did it influence your career path until now?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll try to keep it short, but I started my technology career at an architectural firm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. What I did, I was an illustrator on staff where we actually used pen to paper, right? And I would render illustrations of architectural buildings, commercial buildings for presentation. Um, at that firm, they bought an Apple computer to do CAD drawings for interior design. They put that computer in an office and no one went near it. Everyone was scared to death of it. No one wanted to touch it, except this guy. So I went back there out of curiosity and just started poking around, and right away fell in love with the technology and learned CAD at that architectural firm by myself with help of some instruction, but no one really knew anything at the time, so it was a lot of trial and error. I eventually went to school to learn a little bit more about it, and then realized that the computer was going to take over the whole graphic industry. At the time, I had a colleague who worked for Chrysler Corporation, and he was an illustrator, illustrating the engine for marketing pieces. He worked in a department of well over 500 illustrators. Within a year, they were down to about 20 because the computer had just simply taken over. And most people were reluctant to learn it and really felt like it was a passing fade. So I was ignorant in my selection to go the computer route, but it paid off because eventually I learned computer graphics and became kind of a leader, at least in my local field, because I jumped in early. It led to a very productive career with the automotive industry, where I worked for all three of the automotive firms here in Detroit at the time. They called them the big three: Ford, Chrysler, and what's the third? Ford, GM, of course. And that led to a very productive animation career, working with Macromedia Flash, which again will date me. Macromedia was then eventually picked up by Adobe. Flash was definitely was eventually phased out of the industry, but it led to a very productive and fulfilling career in graphic arts when it came to digital arts.
I understand. Thank you so much. And how has the technological industry changed over the past 30 years? uh, and how this impacted the field of design according to you?
Oh, tremendously. Again, because of the reluctancy to use these tools in design, there was just a small group, really. Even in a big corporation, there was just a small group of designers who were using these tools. But as you know, they eventually became so prolific that everyone within the industry was using them. Uh, People were coming right out of high school with skills that were way above what I saw coming out of college. Um, so it changed it very quickly. And when the web hit in the 90s, then it took a total right turn. And everything became, it was all about efficiency. It was all about size of files. It was all about making things fast and downloadable. Um, so that led to, of course, a completely different uh, career path for some who got into the efficiency of the web, right? And learning how to make it more productive. So yeah, there during that time, I can tell you that it's kind of a blur how fast things were happening, how many different companies were getting involved, technology that came along. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the mouse came along.
No.
So yeah, I remember the technology being so like at the time pixel oriented. Then all of a sudden it became vector oriented, and yeah, I can't even really explain to you how much I've seen in the computer industry. It's kind of like those who lived through the depression or lived through the industrial age, I believe, because the computer is something that will forever define that time in my life.
Mhm. And can you describe, because you have been in really many projects, many positions in all your 30-year experience, and can you describe particularly a challenging design project that you have been working on, and can you tell us how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah, at one point in my career, I worked for Ford Motor Company, and I worked for the Asia Pacific department or side of the company, and we had to explain the Ford Motor Company way of life to all those overseas. At the time, they were opening up dealerships all over the world. So those in other countries had to actually learn the corporate way. So
Mhm.
we developed a program called the Ford Acumen. And the Ford Acumen was basically a timeline and a story of Ford, right? And at the time, interactive tools were kind of in their infancy, but we wanted to use them in order to educate. Um, the challenge, of course, was bandwidth. So all of these graphics we had to create for this application had to be skinny down to less than 13K individually so that they could be downloaded quickly. Um, so one of the challenges was, well, how as a graphic designer can you use a gradient? Because imagine how a gradient has so many levels of color. There's no way to squeeze it down to 13K. So we actually, I believe, we pioneered the idea of layering digital graphics so that you could achieve what at the time we were calling 3D. Really wasn't 3D at all. It was just a 2D depth technique to make color appear as if it had depth to it. Challenging, absolutely, because it was a constant iteration of creating a graphic, sizing the graphic, creating the graphic, testing the size. So I would say that of all the things I remember, that was by far the most challenging. Took the most time to squeeze down gradients so that our graphics looked nice when they came through the internet.
Wow. And is there, this question just came to my mind right now while you were explaining this. There was any project as a breaking point in your career? Like it was a 180-degree, or I don't know, change completely your perspective through design and the technological sector. Was there something like that?
Yeah, absolutely, there was. And it really wasn't necessarily a project, it was a change in technology. When the Flash program, Macromedia's Flash program, when it became a developer tool, there was a big change. And maybe you remember this, but they developed a code style called ActionScript. That eventually led to things like JavaScript and some of these other tools that we've come to love. But at the time, I was a designer and I knew Flash through a designer's viewpoint, right? I
Mhm.
didn't understand code. And for the idea that I had to actually change and learn code in order to run the application that I was certified in, I actually taught it at the community level. Um, and now I felt like I was completely left out. I must have felt like those designers who felt that way when the computer came along, those older designers who decided I've been left behind. I really thought I was getting left behind. But thankfully, I kind of put my nose to the grindstone and I learned ActionScript and decided that, if you don't, join them, they're going to beat you. I wouldn't let them. So I learned ActionScript. That led to, of course, learning HTML, learning DHTML, and eventually becoming pretty savvy in that, at least in its infancy. I leave that to the coders these days, but back then that was a turning point. I wasn't sure if I'd even be able to stay in the industry because I could see that it was turning towards codes and numbers, and that's just not how I function.
So we can say that also you have proficiency in HTML, right, as a designer.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
I love the language.
And connecting this, if someone wants to become an art director, as you are, or a designer, what advice would you give to someone to try to start this kind of career in the technological sector based on your previous experience? Can you give some tips and advices? Because
Absolutely.
because here we're mixing the design, the artistic part, and the
Yeah.
technological engineering part of coding, which is amazing, both of them. But together, for at least for me, it's kind of how can we mix them? Can you please
Yeah.
tell us about it?
Yeah, the I guess the analogy that comes to mind is it's a political one. When you have two sides of a political party and you hear the term they've reached across the aisle, right? I would recommend that designers do that. Reach across the aisle and work very closely with developers
Mhm.
because we know that divide it's pretty thick. You're either a developer or a designer, and there's only a small group out there that can do both. I feel like I got lucky when I made that decision because it was more of a survival decision than anything else. But don't become pigeonholed. Don't think that you have to be skilled in something very specific. Try to wear as many hats as you can. You don't have to be an expert at one thing, but if you're pretty good at just about all the things that you encounter, if you have a high level of aptitude, you can be successful. But I think the number one advice I would give is become a collaborator. Uh,
Mhm.
Become a collaborator who listens to others. Be a be a good listener. I really believe that's what made our relationship, at least my relationship with Fabrikod, so successful. Is that we collaborate really well. You guys listen very well. I try to listen very well, and we get it done based on bringing those ideas together. So, be a good listener and embrace those across the aisle.
And putting aside the technical part, just in the creative and design part, uh, also is a question that just came to my head. Uh, is it must for someone to study a degree or something to start being a designer, or just by a more, how can I say, non-academical way you can become an art designer? What do you think about that, and what can you say about this?
Well, the short answer is absolutely not. You don't. I don't believe you require a degree in order to get a job or have a successful career in this industry.
Mhm.
Does it give you a leg up? Absolutely. I've seen that throughout my career as well. But usually, when I'm looking for a young designer to hire, I go right after their portfolio, right after their work. If they don't have much experience, I go on sheer talent. But if they do have experience, then I look for those types of projects that are challenging, where they had to work with big groups, where collaboration was a must. Um, yeah, I don't believe that it's necessary to have that higher education in order to be successful. In
Mhm.
fact, when I think about my career, yeah, I learned some helpful things in school. But the things that I use daily, I learned in the field.
Yeah.
I learned through, very helpful mentors, those who were willing to take a risk, even, and bring me into the fold.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I would say don't be discouraged that you don't have that degree. If you feel like you can do this and you love the work, you'll find it.
Nice. That's good to hear, to be honest, because many young talent are struggling if they should need a degree or not. But of course, you're really right. That degree in a good college can boost your professional career, but it doesn't mean that you will be better or worse in that
Yeah.
field. And you, as an art director in Supply Frame, what are the things that you enjoy the most in your position right now?
Um, you know, being older and more experienced, you tend to get pushed into management roles, right? You tend to get pushed into those director roles, which, um, when you're younger, you're reaching for those roles. You want to be the director, you want to be the one calling the shots and making the calls. But as you get older, you start to realize that it's really the work that brought you here, right? Creating and using the technology is by far more enjoyable, at least to me, than actually managing
Mhm.
uh, the other employees. But you know, with age too and experience, you comes the desire to give back what you've learned, right?
Mhm.
And so, being a good mentor is just as much as it can be, just as fulfilling.
Mhm.
Uh, but I do miss doing the work, So whenever I get a chance, I try to jump back in. Unfortunately, what I found is these young designers are just
And having
amazing.
that
I
problem,
mean,
right?
I hate to call you out here, Osman, but working with Osman and watching how quickly he could iterate on a design. Uh, we have a young designer on our team at Supply Frame. I feel the same way about her. Um, I'm just in awe of how quickly their mind works. And it just reminds me that, yeah, you get older, you get a little slower. And I don't like to think that I've designed everything I could possibly design, but I'm getting to the end there. And so it's nice to kind of work with young designers who can inspire you
Mhm.
and show you what can be done still.
Can it be related? The fast world that we are living right now, everything is so fast. Every outcome is really fast. Is it also a consequence for the designers that they're really, for example, as you said, Osman or Supply from Design, they're really quick doing stuff. Is it because they're affected by the context we're living in, where everything is fast and instant and instantaneous?
I believe that. Absolutely. I believe that young people have this ability to put, I wouldn't call them blinders, but they can really focus. And I don't know, maybe that's the, the gaming age. I don't know, because I didn't grow up with video games, but when I watch young people play video games, I'm just amazed how fast they go. For instance, my teenage son tried to get me to play video games with him, and I so overwhelmed by the speed, I didn't even know it was happening. And he could not only could he play at that speed, but he could tell me what to do. I was just amazed by that. So it makes me think that the younger mind, not only is it faster, but you're right, it's been molded by uh, its surroundings, its environment. And maybe you have the ability to block out all those things that can distract you. Uh,
Wow.
I hate to say this out loud because I often get picked on for saying it, but I do believe it's a generational thing, and that those of that younger generation just have that natural skill to be able to block out all the noise and really focus.
Wow. Yeah, I think the same, to be honest. I mean, as a grown up with video games, yeah, I feel the way you're really explaining it. So I really feel you. So now, in the more in a project, in the project line, you really worked in many projects, different ones. You even lead many projects. So, what can you tell us about project management?
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, this is a sore subject for me, Moad, because you are a fantastic project manager. I am not. It's
I'm
something that
sure.
I have. It's something that I have I've really worked on over the years to get better at. And I don't know if that's like a right brain, left brain thing. Designers who are bad project managers will tell you that it's all about their right brain and left brain. I don't know if I believe that. I think it's more of a concentration issue. You know, as designers, we like to kind of live in the clouds, right? And we live in our own mind at times, and it's hard for us to really focus on what's happening around us. Project management is completely the opposite. Where you're constantly twirling those plates in the air. You could have this ability to focus and to remember and to have all these things at your fingertips. Um, I do, but that being said, like I said earlier, designers need to wear more hats. Um, there was a time when I could rely on project managers all the time. There was an abundance of them. But as I moved on in my career, I started to realize that project management was something that was going to be expected of everyone involved. So I would encourage young designers, if they're not naturally good at it, take a class, find
Yeah.
a mentor, find someone who can help you, direct you through the whole idea of project management, and it will really make your career a lot less painful.
Thank you so much for your answers, Matt. It was a great talk, but still, we have an exciting second part of this interview. So, guys that were watching us from YouTube or from any other social media, please leave a comment, share our content, and stay tuned for more exciting content like this.